So this will be the first panel, the first high-level panel, moderated by María José Sanz. María José, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone. And well, first of all, thank you to the panelists for being here with us. I think it's been a very illustrative introduction of what data challenges are, starting from something that we thought it was helped by putting principles in the table. But apparently, we have more problems than that, and starting with the interpretation of the principles, and then, of course, that by having principles, we don't make data interoperable, which is one of the major challenges we have. So having said that, I want to put to the panel a general question. And the panel is composed basically by María José Rallo. She's the president of AEMET, which is the National Institute of Meteorology of Spain. Adolfo Uriarte, which is the Director General of Patrimonio Natural and Climate Change of the Basque government. Alessandra Alfieri, which is the head of the unit of climate change of the IMF, a very recent unit. And Sebastian Treyer, which is the director of an institute I really like very much to work with, which is IDDRI in Paris. The first question I want to put forward all of you, and you can answer in order if you want, of sitting, is, I mean, what are the challenges that from your perspective and your actual role and what you are being advising or doing, are you facing in gathering, use, and provide support, advice to inform decisions in terms of, are you having enough information? Is the information good enough? What are sorts of improvements you will be expecting? Given that, as Mark was highlighting, there is an increasing amount of data in the table, and there is also extremely fragmented. So, María José, what else? What will be your challenges here?
Okay, thank you very much, María José, for the invitation to participate in this channel. As María José has mentioned, just for all of you, those of you who don't know what AEMET, AEMET is the Spanish National Meteorological Service. And we are, in general, a provider of data. Our data is used in many different fields, and we have millions of data. And to contextualize a little bit, I must remind that weather information has been recorded for a long period of time, in some cases more than 100 years. And there has always been a strong international collaboration to exchange this data, to share the data, and to have common rules on how to measure this data. We have to think of these rules 100 years ago. And to open all this data to the society, AEMET decided to implement an open data platform, a platform for a free access to all these millions of data and of observations, forecasts, radiation, radars, among others. And, well, that's been a challenge. I don't know if it's possible to show the address, the web address of this open data. And the amount of accesses that we had during the last years has increased, for me, amazingly. I mean, I don't know if we can see the chart with the data. That is the following one, please.
Next slide, please.
Well, this is the evolution of the accesses to our open data. It's incredible how much it's increasing. And even if 2024 is not shown in this chart, we have had a record last April with an average of 3.8 million accesses daily. I mean, for me, it's an amazing figure. Of course, most of them are machine to machine. And what are our challenges nowadays? Well, we are in the process of implementing the European regulation of the high-value datasets. And according to this regulation, more data must be with metadata, and open for free, of course, and complying with the specific or specifications, technical and legal, to more or less adopt the FAIR principles. This is very challenging for us, and perhaps after we can deepen a little bit on the sub-challenges of that big challenge.
Thank you, María José. I think that's very interesting because usually meteorological agencies are well known for producing lots of data that many people use for very different purposes. Adolfo, you are also working in the Basque government, and you are also facing these type of challenges. When you work at that level, subnational level, what are the extra challenges that you find?
Good afternoon, everybody, first of all. And yes, well, I should probably start saying that the Basque Country has quite a complex governance, both in terms of our administration, but as well in terms of all the people that are gathering data that are relevant to climate change studies. And we've got lots of actors, and I think that the main problem is the restraints for interoperability that we have, right? So we have got our own methodological agency, as AEMET knows, AEMET. We have got a water management agency. We have got a health department. We've got 4 universities, actually, if we count this University of Navarra. This is as well in our territory. We've got large research and technology capacities with BRTI, BC3, and so all of them are gathering information and keeping their own data and their own data systems. We've got plenty of viewers and databases, and quite dispersed. So data that are needed to develop integral and multi-objective solutions are not easily to access. So this is the main problem at the moment. And you know, María José, that I have been working for now 4 years trying to boost collaboration between all the administrations, and especially between all research and data providers. We need to break down all these data silos that still exist in the Basque Country and all over, right? So there is a need for us, there is a need to take urgent decisions. But many of these decisions are being delayed because there is still a lack of ground truthing as well. So we've got Copernicus with all the information that Copernicus is giving, but we need to ground truth all this information. We've got a lot of on-ground stations, and we need to scale up all this information that's coming from satellites, and we need still to do a lot of work in this area. So, well, we are considered in Europe as front runners in terms of adaptation, for example, but we fear that running too much, it's probably a problem as well. So it might carry us to take unsuccessful solutions and even to misadaptation, which of course has got a big economic impact. So there is an obvious lack of analytical tools, and that should help managers to make decisions. And we are working together in several European and international platforms. Some of you probably know them: Regions 4, Under 2, CPMR, and Core, a whole bunch of different platforms and organizations. There are regional organizations. It's not that we are trying to raise the voice of the regions in the state rule decisions, but it's always to learn from each other and to learn from each other's experiences and to advance as fast as possible. So trying to commit at least the least possible errors.
Thank you, Adolfo. I think it's very interesting to learn that learning from experience of users is also very important in order to address the challenges, not only from the scientific perspective, but also learning from what's going on the ground. So, Alessandra, you are dealing with something else which is very important in the world those days, which is finance. I mean, what are the challenges that you foresee, also because you are dealing at the global level?
Yeah, I feel kind of that I don't fit in this panel, but but I mean, and we are also quite new in the space of climate at the IMF. This started just in 2022 when we launched a climate strategy. Basically now we are providing support to countries to basically mainstream climate change into the macroeconomic policies. And there is a lot of increasing demand for data to support these policies. And I mean, we use this word macro-critical, which is, I think, more an IMF jargon, which means basically that now climate has become, I mean, as in provides important important impact to the economy and to the financial stability. So that's why the IMF got into these pictures. So, and what it actually impacts is the surveillance and analytical work of the IMF. So we do every year this, what we call Article 4 missions. Basically, we go to every country to assess the economic and financial stability of countries. And now climate has become fully integrated into this assessment. So it's no more kind of an add-on, but it is fully integrated, and it is also fully integrated into the flagship publication of the IMF, so the World Economic Outlook, the Financial Stability Report, and the Fiscal Monitor now include climate as mainstreamed into these publications. So this, of course, requires quite a lot of data. And so we are working in two levels, let's say, more working with global data sets, but also supporting countries in strengthening their statistical system to answer to these policy demands. Another area that we are working on now is lending. So the IMF has launched the Resilience and Sustainability Fund, which is an initiative to assist countries to address structural challenges that pose macroeconomic risks. And this include challenges linked to climate change, but also pandemics and so on. And this is a little bit different from the main work with the IMF, which usually focuses on short term, but now in the case of climate, we are looking also at the longer terms. We also understand that we are the new kid on the block here, and we don't have a lot of expertise in this space. So we are working very closely with those that have been working with this much longer than us, and with the World Bank in particular, there is now a framework, a partnership framework that is being developed in the context of climate, of course with the UN and with a lot of partners with the areas, and we'll discuss more on Thursday on that. One thing, I mean, the ministers of finance and the central bank's governors recognize that there are data gaps in the space of climate, and they launched this initiative, the Data Gap Initiative, the third phase, which recognize climate as one of the priorities, and 7 of the 14th recommendations are actually on climate, addressing issues of data related to mitigation, adaptation, climate finance, and expenditures and subsidies. So that what we are doing is trying to develop the methodology, because in this space, some of the things are already agreed. When we talk about energy and emission accounts, we have the SEA that provides the standard on how to calculate these things. But some others, like for example, when we talk about climate finance and physical and transition risks and expenditures, climate-related expenditure and subsidies, the methodology is not there. So we are trying to develop this methodology and then integrate it into the update of the existing standards. So the system of national accounts and balance of payments, they have some sections dealing in particular with ESGs, the environment, sustainability and governance, and on climate finance. And then there are the new, the updates of the new standard, the system of environmental economic accounts central framework, and the government's finance statistics and the monetary finance statistics manual, which will be updated. The update has just been launched. So the idea is to really integrate all the climate change into all the updates of the statistical standards.
Thank you, Alessandra. Yeah, that's very interesting, because now everyone wants to act. For acting, we need to embed into the economy what needs to be done, and we are facing very, very difficult transitions. So it's good that you are a new kid in the block. Sebastian, you know very well the context, the global context of climate change and biodiversity and how it's been evolving in the last decades. So what are the challenges that you see from this more global perspective of both crisis and data?
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. I think my first point would be to say that we've seen an enormous... I was looking at the conference statements, and I was looking at this idea that data is increasing extremely rapidly, and I see that in the way that we can monitor the state of the environment on the ocean, for instance, and that's incredibly useful. But there is one part that I think we are discussing here that is extremely important, and one part of the data that we need to design and evaluate climate policies or nature protection policies are about socioeconomic. The assessment of what is the socioeconomic use, the social impact of those policies, the users or the economic agents in the technical systems like the food systems or the energy system. And this is where it's so important for me to be able to exchange with the national statistical institutes. But let me just take a few examples. I know that time is short, but I want to show that what we are looking for instance, is the level and cost of energy used by individual households, the type of cars that and the level of income of those who own the cars when we look at low emission zones. But it's also, for instance, lifestyle choices of consumers of food and how they are related to their socioeconomic and cultural background. So this is incredibly complicated data to access, but maybe accessible. Another type of complicated data to access is the fact that, for instance, when we look at farmers, in Europe, we know a lot about farmers because this is a very administrated policy. But when actually we also need to look to understand the investment strategy of food processors. This is much more complicated to access. Or the level of CapEx and OpEx investments of an oil and gas company, which they normally are supposed to reveal, but are not so happy to disclose. Or, for instance, the new R&D investment of pesticide companies, to what extent they are betting on other things than just chemicals to protect agriculture. So these are just examples to show you that I see that, there are some of these data that are not so easy to be disclosed and to access. So I have three messages out of that. First, the data collection on these socioeconomic data is extremely developed in Europe, for instance, because this is a context that I know. But I know very much that for African colleagues, this is still a very big challenge. So I think a big message is, yes, data is increasing, but supporting national statistical institutions, for instance, on agricultural systems, is something that still needs to be supported a lot. So that's my first message on data collection. The second one is that some of this data is confidential, or is is also the object of an economic business, of profitability of some of those who produce the data. So this is something where I believe we need also to have policy come in for disclosure and transparency. And that's something that I think was very present in many of the examples. Sometimes you don't want the data to be completely accessible if it's about the health of individual people. But this economic data is also something that we need to find the right balance between transparency and disclosure. My third message is that when it comes to behavioral patterns of individual people, I believe that there is a lot of data that might be very interesting coming out of social networks and lots of things that are online that might be very interesting. But I think we need to invest a lot not only in statistical institutes but in research, because counter-analysis of what the perception we have from social network might be very different from what people actually do in their practical life. And so, yes, we need to have public money for statistical institutes and for research institutes to have the counter-analysis of what comes out, but also to be sure that we have the policy and regulation for disclosure, because that accessibility of data is not necessary. And I think on the IMF side, we know very much that risk assessment is something that is both extremely important, but very central for the business of insurers, for instance.
Thank you, Sebastian. Which brings me to the fact that we know that private sector companies are owning a lot of data those days, in particular those which are digital technological companies. And I guess that also points out something that probably could be also a message, which is that we need public-private partnerships where data is shared, so that there is not duplicative efforts to collect data, which are already produced. And we will have examples during the conference on how those things are emerging with some sectors in the area of adaptation of climate change. Now, I want to pass to a second round of questions where, María José, I mean, you told us that you want to deep a little bit more on the specific challenges that AEMET has, but I would like you to focus on this deep dive on how you foresee this enhancement of interoperability and overcoming the challenges that Mark was saying about understanding fairness and things like that.
Well, from the point of view of a public organization like AEMET, we face specific issues to deal with all this amount of perspective and problems that the FAIR principles imply. And I would highlight three main challenges or sub-challenges because we are, as I mentioned before, we are dealing with the implementation of the high-value datasets. Those datasets are interoperable, they fulfill all the specifications of the European regulation, but this is something, a front desk, that requires a very demanding work in the back desk, and it implies a complete transformation of our organization. Then there is an issue of governance. We have to work hard in improving the governance of all the millions of data that we manage. We are going to implement a governance office, a data governance office in AEMET, that is the unit that is going to be in charge of the promotion of the and management, reuse of all the data. And as a public organization, we face the issue, as many others, of the lack of professionals to do it in an adequate pace and as quick as the situation demands. The second important challenge is technological infrastructures, and it's something that is essential, and we are in the process of investing in a new service on the cloud, new in cybersecurity, storage, processing capability, many different needs that must not be taken for granted because are essential for the robust provision of new services. And the third one is crowdsourcing and artificial intelligence. They are not the same, of course, but both are related. We need to have sources of information from the most traditional ones to the more new, not so new, but as the ones that come from, for example, from social networks, and to have an adequate structure, and then to use artificial intelligence to provide more products, more services, especially related to climate change. I mean, there is a clear relationship between climate change and the economy of data, and we need, as a public institution, to give answers to the needs of the society. Then we are working hard in these three sub-challenges, and well, to sum up, I would say that data is essential for the mission of AEMET. We are very focused on this complete transformation of the organization to become a data-centric organization, and well, we are a tool for the society and for all the rest of research and activities that are undergoing.
Adolfo, the Basque government is very worried about environmental issues to solve problems from the past, to protect biodiversity. The landscape of the Basque country is also very complex. So what are these additional challenges that you see in addition to the access of data that you foresee in order to use the data for making better decisions, as you indicated before?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. Actually, as I said before, the shared databases is a must. We need to share databases, and we need to improve as well our analytical capacities. If we manage to put all the data that we have in a common system, or at least to standardize and give access to different data silos, as I've mentioned before as well, especially giving the results, the promising results of artificial intelligence, the decision-making process will be sustainably improved, definitely, both in terms of speed and quality of the decisions. Tools like ARIAS that you have mentioned as well in your intervention this morning is an artificial intelligence modeler that probably most of you will hear in the next days, in the next sessions. I strongly believe that this will help to construct, better decisions, right? So it will help us to take much better decisions because it will help to construct much better ecological process models. Some of our process models are very complex, some others don't exist at all, and I think that if we manage to feed areas with good information, we will end up having very, very good results, especially for managers. So to make decisions, I think it's going to be something very, very critical. And as you know, we strongly bet on tools like ARIAS. And after this few minutes of propaganda, we have a lot of knowledge gaps. We still do not know. We know that ecosystems that are pristine or that are not affected by pollution or by stress, so non-stressed ecosystems usually are more resilient, no? But we do not know what's going to happen with all these areas that we are recovering now. We are in a strong mood now to try to recover lots of land and to recover marshland and natural habitats, but we do not know what to do. Should we just take away all the invasive plants or should we replant it with autochthonous plants, because we do not know what's going to happen actually in these areas. We do not know. Biologists still don't know how the different species are going to react to the different stresses that we are expecting and that we are already suffering. So there is a lot of research that still needs to be done. So we do as well make a very strong bet for knowledge improvement or knowledge generation. And just let me 1 minute to tell you a new strategy that we are implementing now in terms of gathering all information related to the natural environment, to our natural heritage. We have been developing a nature information system now for more than 10 years in the Basque country, but we've changed now the strategy this year, or not this year, a few years ago actually, but now we are implementing all this. And this, what this new strategy tries to do is, as I mentioned at the beginning, we have got a very complex governance. So we've got the provincial councils that are managing most of our natural areas, and they are gathering a lot of information. But their information is in the provincial councils. It's difficult that this information comes up to the government, right? So what we have done, we have spent a lot of money in a new nature system or nature information system. It's called SINE in Spanish. If you SINE, Sistema de Información de la Naturaleza de Euskadi, if someone wants to look for it. And this system not only, provides, or it's fed with data, with standardized data that we have as well to report then to Europe, to the ministry and to Europe. This is the way. So what we are doing as well is we are customizing all this tool. So anybody providing or being able to provide information or with potential information for the system is going to have a customized system, and they will implement their own data in this system, and our system will read directly from all this system. So at the end, everybody will have their own system, but we at the government, we are going to have all the information from each one of the partners providing information. So this is something that we are on one side giving them some tools that cost a lot of money, and on the other side, we are gonna be happy to have all this data in our system, and of course, all the data are open data, and everybody will have some access to all the data.
Yeah, that's good, because one of the first steps is to make sure that we all are aware of the data we have and then start connecting the data, and then we can raise the issues, the more complex issues. So that's a very interesting move forward. And I think it was also very good to listen that you are in favor of having systems which are more modular in order to model processes and be more transparent, because we don't know everything, as you said.
Exactly.
Well, Alessandra, I mean, everyone is focusing on the means of implementation, meaning finance. So what will help to target finance to accelerate action on your view, based on the accessibility of data and the progress that you have been showing earlier that IMF is doing?
Yeah, I mean, of course, we need to provide the policymakers with data that allows them to redirect the capital flows towards low carbon and resilient investments. So in particular, I think there are 3 areas I would like to focus on. One is the risk assessment that was mentioned before. Basically, lenders and investors and insurers, they need data, and they need to understand the impact of climate on people, on assets, on the economy more in general. So we need to understand where the hazards are going to hit, who will be exposed to these hazards, and what would be the impact of these hazards, and also where these hazards are going to take place, because we want to understand where to invest and how to mitigate the impact of these hazards. And for this, basically, we need to integrate information in different layers, and this is really the issue of having the data being fair and being integratable across the world. I mean, there is one good thing is that we could use for data poor countries global data sets that can provide at least an initial estimate of these risks, and then they can be improved using national data sets. And for this, we are also working with the areas team to develop some sort of a tool that will allow to calculate this, to do these risk assessments at the country level. The second area that I wanted to mention is the measuring progress towards low carbon economy. I think it is important to have reliable data on air emission and energy use. And this is true both at the macro level to understand what are the economic activities that are impacting the climate, but also at the business level. So there are disclosure measures that are increasingly being adopted, and I mean at the European level there is the CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which now is making mandatory the reporting on greenhouse gas emissions. At the global level, there are also efforts led by the CDP, the Carbon Disclosure Project, the Net Zero Data Public Utility, and the UNFCCC GCAP to make available data at the business level on greenhouse gas emissions, and so the idea of transparency hopefully will also lead to more towards a standardized approach of measuring emissions. And then the third one I wanted to mention is, of course, climate finance and getting data on carbon pricing using green taxonomies, and also climate-related stress testing for financial institutions. So what we are doing in this space is we are trying to, we have a climate indicators dashboard where we actually disseminate data on climate, in particular climate in relationship with the economy, to basically make this data available to our country economists, but also more broadly to the public, to make basically aware of this interaction between the climate and the economy. I think that it is an exciting time. I think that there is a lot of interest. We notice also from the IMF side that a lot of countries are coming asking for support on developing climate data. But I think there is also not a lot of understanding of what this means. So it's exciting time because we need to educate people on what it actually means, what data can be developed, and also how they can be used in policy and decision making.
Yeah, I mean, we're a bit late, but I want to give the opportunity to Sebastian, because we have been talking very recently about international cooperation as one way to leverage all this. So what do you think will be the priorities to foresee in international cooperation to help all this to move forward?
Thank you very much. I try to be short, but I want to really emphasize the fact that at national, local, but particularly at international level, we see that a lot of the information and data that we are talking about is of a very political nature. I remember talking to the director of INPE, the National Satellite Teledetection Director in Brazil. The data that they have on deforestation in Brazil every year is extremely politicized to the extent that he receives or she receives death threats about the fact that what he's going to publish. So knowledge is power, but in particular when what we try to do is to enable strategic use of that data and information to make a change, to make a transition towards a different world or something that would be more sustainable. That is going to be challenged by those parties that favor the statu quo or that might lose from the transition. I just want to put that vividly in our picture because that's going to happen at every level of governance. And we need to find a way, I mean, I say we, I hope you accept me in the community of those who produce those data. We need to find a way to make that without compromising the credibility of our institutions, science or statistical institutions. And that's really going to be extremely important. I could also have talked about the IPCC of chemicals, where a lot of the data is going to be in the hands of the private chemical industry, and we need to find a way to have proper, so it's a matter of partnership, as you had said, María, José, but it's also a way that we need to disclose the information that they don't want to disclose, because that's deal on power, that deal on the data is going to be a negotiation on who has the power, and that's going to be extremely important. And of course, there are things that are extremely important in the negotiation where everybody needs to believe that what China discloses on their greenhouse gas emissions is actually true. And so that's also something where we need to find a way to not infringe on China's sovereignty, but at the same time ensure that we can believe what they say they do. Same for France. Huh? I'm not saying that China is the only problem, but China is much bigger than France. So I've seen interesting examples. And that was led, for instance, by the French CNES, the National Space Research Council in France, that has developed the Space Climate Observatory, where it was a very informal coordination of NASA, CNES, and others to just say, we have a charter of how we are going to exchange on data and model in a way that is that was very technical and very depoliticized, trying not to involve the national governments of each and every institutions in order to be below the radar and being able to ensure between the community of data providers and scientists something that would be interoperability and common understanding without having to have a proper political negotiation on how are we going to share data between governments, because when you include diplomats, it becomes extremely complicated. But I'm not sure that this model is always going to be able to hold, and that's why UN institutions on statistics, for instance, are extremely important, because that's a way where, I mean, the UN institutions are used to negotiate both the very political issues in a very technical manner that goes forward without being impeded by diplomats speaking to one another. So I think that's, to me, very important. We need to find the right governance framework. Sometimes it needs to be depoliticized because it's about interoperability, but we need to be sure that we are also ready when it comes to, when it is going to become obvious that there are political issues that are inside it. And in particular, how do we ensure that we have credibility of our institutions, that the way that sometimes you are going to publish data that are not going to be liked by some of governments, and I fear about my own government in a few months, but that's completely out of the scope of this conference. When a government is going to challenge its own national statistical institutes, what do we do? How do we ensure that we have a community at global level that ensures the credibility and that the data is sound and that it cannot be challenged? So that's, to me, I'm sorry, it's a very broad challenge that I think it needs to be very, very, very cautiously addressed. Governance issues about how we ensure areas where we can have technical discussions, but also moments when we are going to have very political discussions.
Yeah, thank you, Sebastian. We are late, but I think there are examples where this is being tried to do. For example, in the case of the greenhouse gas inventories, where the UN is being setting some standards that are followed by countries, and there are review processes by independent panels that are helping to provide this without, harming the institutions or the credibility of the data producers. Having said that, I would like to thank again all the panelists. I think now we have setting the scene for discussions during the conference about how to solve those issues. And I really appreciate that it was coming from a different perspective than the data science and the statisticians here. So I hope this is going to be a very good starting point for your discussions in the next days.
Okay.